Alright, so I didn't show you this, but I added the front end. It has two formers, and then it's got a wraparound and then a bottom piece. But it wasn't hard to do, so I didn't really bother showing. Now I put in the instrument panels. I put the front one in, and there's really not much to show here, except there's the instrument panel, and I cut it out, so I left a little tab. See that tab up there? And I used that as a place to glue, because otherwise it's really hard to figure out how to get them in. And there they are, both in. They look fine. Just simple. Now here's the cowling started. There's the first part that goes right in the front, and you can see that little arrow that's facing forward. And there is a little piece that is going to give you some purchase for the next piece, and that goes towards the front, towards that direction. So the little teeth point that way. So all I do is on that tooth piece, there's actually a little line. It helps you line up exactly where that's supposed to go. It's also a little middle line, a little hash mark in the middle. So it's actually quite easy to line up. Add a little glue. A little bit goes a long way on this one. And then you very carefully lay it down. Again, I start in the center. And then you match it up along its line so that the little teeth are sticking out. And that's going to give you, again, a place to add your first little thin ring that's going to start forming the cowling. It's pretty typical how these work, and it works very well. Make sure it's nice and glued, nice and tight, and Bob's your uncle. I went ahead and colored those teeth because I knew they were going to, they were going to show through. Now, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with this cowling. Was I going to fill it and paint it or not? Because if I was, that was useless. But I was trying to make it so I could actually do it like a Polish modeler and not do that. But anyway, rolled that cowling part. You can see that's the part that's going to butt up onto the main fuselage. And then I started rolling the cowl rings themselves. And I'm using something that allows me, or a little back end of a brush that's tapered, and that gives me a little bit of a curl that you can see. And then this is boring, however it's important. This is just butt joins, which I was always afraid of, but I like them a little bit better now. But you start by putting these together, and they're right notched up to where the middle line is. And you just start by putting a little bit of glue, and then this is sped up because it's boring as all get out. But you just carefully add a little bit of glue as you go, and just very carefully add the different pieces and butt them up against each other. And just make sure that they're straight. Make sure there's a smooth transition, basically, that they're edge joined. And all I'm doing in this, even though this is sped up, is just very carefully going around each little bit, and only adding a little bit of glue at a time. You don't add a whole bunch, because then you can just take a little piece, make sure it's good and straight, and flush, and then by the time you're done, you have a cowl ring, and you do all of them the same way, and you add them slowly together, and there's the finished cowling, and it will fit very nicely against that bulkhead. It actually looks quite good. I still think I'm going to end up probably filling it and painting it, but it doesn't look too bad. Now we started the engine, and using one of these quilling tools. These are really nice. And to make these cylinders were really easy cylinders to make. So there's the piece that you cut out, and that big white piece is where you're going to put a lot of glue. And you can see the drawn parts where the cylinder is going to be. But you put that little piece into that quilling tool. And maybe quilling tools are cheating, but boy, they sure make a nice difference. I wish I had one that had a deeper groove in it, longer groove. But I got it started folding and rolling along on itself. Held it in place with my index finger, a little pressure, and then put the glue down there, just a strip of glue, and then smeared it out so it's smooth along the length. And then you start rolling, just kind of slowly and carefully, kind of keeping pressure on it, but you just start rolling. And you can just kind of roll your finger along, and your index finger is kind of pushing, and then you roll the tool, and once in a while check for alignment. But as you roll it, it just rolls up all on by itself, and you can see that it ends up coming nice. And there's where you need to make sure that piece, that tongue, is fitting over the white. And as you roll it, and it comes right up, bang, to that edge point. And now you've got this dark colored cylinder all the way around. So those were the easiest cylinders I've ever rolled. So whoever designed those, they were very slick. Made it very easy, especially with the quilling tool. 9 cylinders on this little sucker. Here's the crankcase. I made it off camera, but all it is 2 bulkheads, one there, one on the other side, with my balsa. And then the outside piece where the cylinder is going to attach is rolled around and glued in place. Or actually, what I did was I rolled it and I made my own tab. So I made that into a little cylinder. And then, you see, there's a seam right there. And I ended up, this wasn't in the kit, but I'm just showing you, I cut a little piece of paper as a tab and then glued it on one side. And then that gave me a place to glue and put them together. That makes it stronger, just made it easier. I'm just showing you how I did that. But that's your little crankcase. Now, that is a little piece of wire I cut that is where the propeller shaft is going to go. And it goes through the whole engine and then onto the propeller ultimately and into the bulkhead too. Although later you're going to see I end up modifying it a little bit. But I started to pin this through the wood very carefully. They've all got little marks showing you where it's supposed to go, which is handy. So you don't have to guess. And I sort of screw them in place and make them go through the balsa. And you end up with these pieces like so. So there's the crankcase ready to go. Start to add all the cylinders. Now a couple more pieces need to go onto this. So there's a piece that goes on there. It's labeled on top of that piece of paper. And so that's one of these little, this piece right there, which is a piece of wood that's been sanded down to, I think, 0.5 millimeter in this case. So a little smaller. So I glued that in place, and it's got a little hole in it. Make sure that it cuts through the hole. There I am putting the little shaft on there that ensures that it's centered, so you don't have to eyeball it or anything. And then you just glue it in place. I lifted it up there, add a little glue in the base right there. A little super glue, I believe, is what I used. And then just squish it down and make sure that it is nice and flush. And it fits really nicely to the front end there. It looks great. Now this side has another piece that's going to go around there. It also has a little skinny shaft. Now these pieces are going to, there's 2 of them, and they're both supposed to be round. See, the one on the far right isn't round, but just to show you, you don't have to cut those. I learned this from one of these Polish sites. See how you're sort of cutting little tangential cuts, basically straight cuts all the way around. And if you do enough of them, you can get a circle cut out really easily with just a little bit of touch up with a sander. You don't need to cut this out as a circle because I get in trouble at certain points. Large circles is it's pretty good, but little ones I get in trouble because the paper starts to sort of bind and twist and never get a nice circle. So with a little bit of touch up around to get the wood clean, you get a nice little circle. And just by doing a bunch of very small cuts around the perimeter, and it works really well. Now this goes over the shaft on the front, which is where the propeller is going to go. Glued that in a little tab that's on there, glued it in place, and then I hold it with some tweezers, and then that just goes over that front piece. You can see it's on the shaft right there. And then I colored it a little bit because it had a little bit of, looked a little funny. See, and there's that shaft. That's where that piece is going to go. And so I roll that piece, which is the outside, and then those 2 little pieces that have been made of balsa, those 2 circular pieces are going to be what's on the ends of this, going to be the caps to this piece. But that, I put it together and hold it in place, and now I've got a little cylinder. Sometimes they come out a little wonky, so what I do is I slide them over, once they're dry, over a brush handle, which is, pretty cylindrical, and you kind of roll those around, and you end up with a nice open, clean circle. Because now what you want to do is put those 2 little balsa pieces in there. Now how I do it is I test fitted it first, but I put some glue on one side, and then I drop the balsa piece on. It doesn't have to be perfect, because then using the table as a flat place, and then a brush end or something, you just push that balsa piece down, and it's naturally going to stop at the very end, and you have a nice flush edge, just like that. Then put some glue on the other side, and then this piece has to go in. And I have to say again, these fit very, very well. Sometimes things don't fit, and you got to sand them or cut them different or add to them, all kinds of things. But these fit well. Made little holes to, again, make sure that's where the shaft is going to go. And then went ahead and put that on the shaft. This part's going to go in the back of the engine. That basically makes a place to mount it. And what I think it's supposed to do, I think I'm doing this wrong. I don't think you're supposed to, I glue that to the back of the engine. I think you're not supposed to glue that. You're supposed to glue that flat piece, the small flat piece I just made, to that right there. You're supposed to glue that to the bulkhead, and then the cylinder crankshaft spins around. I think that's what you're supposed to do, but I didn't do that. I didn't think that through very well. But I want the whole engine to spin anyway. And you can see this kind of droops. So I'm going to play around and do a few more things. Now there's a cylinder. Now to get it so that it fits around the crankcase nicely, the end has to actually have a little bit of a curve into it. And so what I did, I'll show you later how it actually goes on. But there they are, put on. And on the ends, you have to put little end plates. And I cut them out with the little hole punch, which again, it tends to be in 1/33 scale. I can always find a hole punch that's just about perfect, and it makes these kind of, relatively quick and easy to cut out. So put a little bit of white glue on the end and just drop these on all 9 edges, and then you finished off your cylinders. And that's all there is to it. And then I'll show how I put on a cylinder so I can show you what you do. And I'm just putting them on one by one. And you just continue all around the engine until you're done. Now, here's the last cylinder just to show you. You have to curve the base. So you can see I put a piece of sandpaper around that quilling tool, and then I sand back and forth just a little bit to give it a little bit of a concave form to it, and now it will fit quite well, just like that, with a little glue, to the crankcase. And there it is, all done, or at least the main initial part's done. Looks pretty nice. Now, I did this on the triplane, and I did it on this one as well. I have to put in the intakes, and those are those pieces that are on the side there, the piping that goes along the side of the cylinders. So, initially, there's another problem with this, and I don't know if it's something I did or whatever. But see, if I had I'm pointing out that there'd be a big line, a seam, down the middle if I had followed their directions in terms of where they want these intakes to actually attach on top of the cylinder. So I just disregarded that. I used this little plastic tubing for tying flies as my intakes. I put a little zip kicker where it's supposed to go, and then a little bit of glue, or a little bit of zip kicker on the piece of plastic, and then a little glue on the cylinder, and then I just took my tweezers, curled them over, and stuck them right up to the side, and it dries pretty instantly. You glued the other end down already, and you end up with these, and they're just a facsimile. They're not perfect, but they sure look pretty good, even kind of the right color. Now, here's where I tried to fix this thing. See, I put a piece of aluminum tubing on the back because I wanted to make this spin nice. And I found in my garage 2 pieces of aluminum tubing that fit together perfectly and were very friction-free and spun around really nice inside each other. So, what I decided to do was undo the bottom and put in the bigger size aluminum tubing in there. Then I just closed this and glued it in place, which was easy. You don't even know that I opened it up. If you didn't want your engine to move, you don't have to do this. Or you could find a better way, a different way. This is how I did it, which is kind of ham-handed, but it ends up okay. Colored that up a little bit because there was a little bit of white showing through in a couple places. Now, when you stick that engine in there, it just goes in. It's got a long shaft on it, and it spins like a top. It's spins quite well. So I'm pleased with that. And the cowling, I don't show you how I finished it here, but basically I've done what I've done before, which is I fill the inside with glue, and then I'll start sanding this thing down and filling it, and I will paint it black. And that will be fine. I mean, it's not what I really want to do, but I still haven't figured out how to make these as beautiful as the pulls and the checks make them. But there it is. More to come.